Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Cut to the Chase. We're really excited to welcome Tova Davidson and Steve Baker as we're going to be chatting a little bit about community. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to go through and give some introductions. So allow Tova and Steve to introduce themselves. And then we'll talk a little bit about the role of community plays in eco action. So when we think about sustainability and we think about the journey that everyone is going on right now, it can be a pretty lonely place. You know, you might be the person that biked to work one day, and then the next day you're in charge of all these sustainability initiatives. You're trying to build communities of people at the organization, change minds. You know, people might be quite frustrating in terms of their attitudes, and sometimes you can feel like you're a little bit alone. So, what we wanted to do today was talk a little bit more about the role of community and how we can create more climate action. And so we've brought two incredible guests to kind of help us with that topic. So with no further ado, Tova, do you want to do a quick introduction? And then we'll swing it over to Steve and go from there.
Sure, Sanders. Thanks so much, and thanks for having me. My name's Tova. I'm the executive director at an organization called SWR, founded as Sustainable Waterloo Region. We're a social enterprise nonprofit that works at the levels of corporate and organizational sustainability, as well as community scale sustainability. And we serve Guelph, Wellington, Perth, and Oxford counties, as well as Waterloo Region, where we were founded. And we really do understand that community is the way that change happens. And by being hopeful and supportive, we can actually make a better, more prosperous, low carbon future.
I think we can all use a little bit of that right now. Over to you, Steve.
All right, I'm Steve Baker. I'm Director of Facilities and Sustainability at your Neighbourhood Credit Union, or YNCU. We're a local credit union in southwestern Ontario with most of our branches in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, Brantford, Guelph, all the way up to Sault Ste. Marie and Timmins. We have London, Brantford. I think I said Brantford twice. My focus obviously is our facilities and reducing our carbon footprint within our facilities and how we can engage our community partners in doing so.
Very cool. And full disclosure, you are a member of SWR, right, Steve?
Yes, we are a member of SWR, yes.
Awesome. Yeah, and I noticed that you added sustainability to your title fairly recently. So kind of perfect example of how somebody kind of really takes the reins there. It's very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess maybe I was thinking we could start off with is talking a little bit about, why care at all? Why is sustainability important for organizations? Tova, SWR has been around since what, 2008?
15 years now. This is our 15th year.
Oh my God, how incredible. So you've got a little bit of a vantage point on that. So why don't we start maybe with what you've seen over the years, and it'd be great to get an understanding of, what are the main drivers that you're seeing? And then maybe we can dive into Steve for some specific examples of how you're seeing it at YNCU.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you work with organizations for 15 years on sustainability, some of them for the full 15 years, and some of them come and go as their journey through sustainability comes and elevates, and they need supports, and then sometimes they are ready to launch and fly on their own. We see that there are typically 5 or 6 key areas where an organization would get a return on investment for doing sustainability, where it fits actually a business need. And that is, for us, really foundational into why we should be talking about sustainability in an intersectional way, not just as a nice thing to do on the side, but that it's actually good business practice. So those places that we see consistently are, of course, a reduced operating cost. If you're reducing your energy use, it means your operating costs are less, and therefore your greenhouse gases are less. We see it actually tied into green branding and brand awareness, but very, very specifically, and this ties very nicely to the Carbonhound work that you do, in that it's green branding tied with data, because if you don't have data behind it, you risk going into greenwashing, and nobody wants to do that. We see the attraction and retention of employees actually being a major driver, especially in groups like tech companies or in the creative capital industry, where people want to work in places that are aligned with their values, no matter what their job is. They are uncomfortable working somewhere where they don't have the same core beliefs. We see that there is often a concern with risk For most leaders, especially, managing risk is a big deal. And in the climate and business space, a lot of the risk can be reputational, it can be reporting, regulatory, it can even be revenue risk, that you could actually lose money from not being aligned with what your value chain or your government organizations are requiring. We see there sometimes are opportunities for additional revenues. Actually, if you are creating a green product, you actually are growing your business that way. And finally, and actually this one I think is such an interesting one, organizations that deeply commit to sustainability, like truly deeply commit to it. They actually have to look at every way that their business operates, because the status quo, the business as usual operations for almost every sector are not sustainable, and they actually become more innovative. So in all parts of their business, they can become more innovative, more progressive, stand out from the competition because they've committed to sustainability.
So cool. Yeah, I think more and more we're starting to see the value of deep embedding of kind of thinking sustainably into those product teams. Steve, would love to maybe kind of tie this over to YNCU, get a little bit better understanding of your journey that you've gone on, and why sustainability is important to YNCU.
It's very important to YNCU. A few years ago, we adjusted our core values of our organization, and ESG became part of that, and with sustainability. And that's when I was tapped to lead the way with our sustainability aspect of it. And I did what most people would do when you're first getting into it. I did a lot of Google research, and that's when I found our partners at SWR, which really helped us along the way. We are in our tracking phases. We've done all of our scope 1 and scope 2 tracking. We went all the way back to 2019, I think it was, to kind of really get an idea of where we're at and where we're going with our emissions. Now with that actual data, it's really driving some different projects that we might not have had on our project boards, between like window replacements we didn't think we'd be doing anytime soon, low temp heat pumps and different things like that. And then, then a part of that also was driving that sustainable culture within YNCU, because I might have sustainability in my title, but one person doing it nothing happens then. So we have a green team. We're trying to make this an organizational culture change to sustainability. We have 2 main leadership sponsors that help our green team, which is helpful. But the true value we have is that this is board driven. This is driven from the top. So we're not always pushing that rock up the mountain by ourselves. We have support from our higher up within our organization. So.
Very cool. And so, Steve, when you're thinking about this new, sustainability pillar in your organization from a values perspective, when the board was thinking about putting this in place, like, do you have any idea of like kind of what their thinking was around that, and like why they thought this should be a priority?
It's what Tova even touched on. It helps to drive employee engagement and also to keep employees. Our employees were asking for it, and we didn't really have a plan at that time. Our members are asking for it. We're a member-driven organization. We have members coming to us with different ideas for us, and there's some we've done, and some, like, we had one member that's seeing all the great things we're doing, and they asked us why aren't we part of the Green Banking Alliance and all different things like that. So we've done those, but it's what our members are looking for are the exact same things we're doing. It's just times are changing, and quick, and it's either you got to keep up or you're being left behind. And when our members are asking, we're already too late. So now we're playing catch up and getting them what they need, and now we're working on reporting and different things like that.
Very cool. And is it what are the key drivers for you when you're thinking about the KPIs that when you're working on this problem internally? Like, is it typically CO2e? Is it retention? Like, what are some of the things that you're thinking about in terms of that aspect?
For me, I'm going to say I went with the easy stuff first that I knew and understood, which is facilities related things. That was the easy ones, like doing light bulb changes or LED upgrades. But a lot of those projects are done now, and now we're looking for the next thing. And with our partnership with SWR and Carbonhound, now we're seeing the data of our carbon tracking, so we can really focus in. Well, this location wasn't on our radar before. We didn't think it was that bad of an emitter, but you get the actual true numbers and you realize that we need to focus on certain branches before others, and it's changed our project prioritization. And now we're not focusing on our return on our investment. We're focusing on what the actual carbon reduction will be now, and how we can truly transition our organization to have some net zero buildings and things like that.
Very cool. And Tova, maybe just to bring this over to SWR, now that Steve's plugged you a couple of times, which is great. Can you tell us a little bit about, what you've done, like maybe using YNCU as an example or other clients? Like, what do you find the key barriers are typically that organizations are trying to deal with when they're trying to go on that journey as it relates to sustainability?
Steve has such a beautiful story from YNCU because of that board-driven, most senior leadership vision for sustainability and understanding how sustainability serves the organization in the long term. Oftentimes, we run into challenges of expectations on return on investment. There's a often inaccurate assessment that if you do anything for a sustainability purpose, that it's going to cost a lot more money. Often they don't understand life cycle costing as well as life cycle assessments. So life cycle assessment being the carbon footprint, but also the costing. And oftentimes you can make a really good business case for some of these upgrades when you do life cycle costing. And a lot of what we see with the work that Steve and YNCU is doing with things like building renewal is a really important piece of it, to tie together your sustainability plan with your building and facility renewal planning, knowing that you've got projects on the horizon to make sure that you're actually optimizing when you have to do these building renewal projects anyway. So those, not a like for like replacement, but a like for better, and to be constantly looking for that opportunity to go to better. One of the things we see as a real problem as well is the transition of incredible champions like Steve. Let's knock wood and hope that Steve does not leave YNCU anytime soon, but should he go on to some bigger, better thing, even within the organization, sometimes that creates challenges in momentum for organizations who are moving forward. Those are a lot of the things that we see as challenges. And, when economic times are difficult, it can be hard for organizations to understand that investments in things that are sustainable are actually investments in a long-term, lower cost operating, but they are looking at the capital cost in this moment. So those competing financial priorities can be really difficult as well.
Steve, I'd love to get your take on that, because I think something that we hear a lot from our customers is, how do we build the business case for climate? How do we go get budget for these projects, right? So, and lastly, I think the other piece that Tova touched on, which is really fascinating, is how do you create followership in YNCU to try to make this and sustain it beyond just yourself, as you mentioned earlier?
So one of the to get the budget is just the data that we are collecting now, and being able to build a business case with life cycle built into it and things like that, because of our tracking tools with Carbonhound, which we never had before. We would always feel like, well, we'll put my thumb up and I think this is going to be a good project, and here's what our return is. But actually having true data that we're tracking, it's from our utility bills, and we know what we're actually consuming, and then we can actually show like our actual reductions and what they're going to be and where we're going to be in 10 years. And getting that commitment from leadership, and then moving away from just our return on investment, just straight dollar figures, and switching that mindset to actual COE reductions. And then to talk about the other part about shifting, even the organizational shift for sustainability, I'm going to plug SWR. We just finished up our carbon cleanse, and that is a big one. It is a fun way to drive competition within the organization to be more sustainable. And just from where we were our first year 3 years ago, where we may have had 10 points, I feel like, because we just couldn't get it off the ground. And this year we finished second. I think it was just a huge driver. You can see the shift within our organization, and it's across the board. It's not just pockets of people anymore. It's full branch participation. And it's just, that fun competitiveness that you can bring out, but also educating everybody on like small sustainable changes that they can do within their own teams. And then from that, our green team, when we started 3 years ago, was 5 of us. So I'm going to say they're pretty well voluntold to join. And now we have people that are more than willing to join, and they're happy to join, and they're asking to join, which is huge. Now we're a team of 10, and it's across the organization, and we're constantly, now we get to select people that can help us, and they bring different aspects to it from the organization too.
Very cool. Tova, I mean, maybe you want to give us a high level on the carbon cleanse, and I'd love to, if you've got it, it'd be interesting to learn more about how initiatives like this, how you've seen them drive kind of behavioral change, and how important these might be in terms of that shift.
Yeah, it's a cool part of our Impact Network program. The Carbon Cleanse, this was its 10th year. So I've been with SWR for 10 years, and so I have seen it for every year that it's gone on. The Carbon Cleanse is an inter-member challenge for engagement. And what we do is we work with our key champions, and that's what we would call Steve. Steve is our champion. Our key champions to roll out these engagement opportunities within their organizations. And we model it by week. So we might have an energy week or a waste week or a transportation week or water. Each year can be a little bit different. And what we're asking people to do is to engage in ways that are fun and interactive, to be able to build a culture of sustainability. Because there's a very famous quote that says, if we could have solved the climate crisis with engineering, we would have already. So data is important and all those things are important, but if the culture is not there, then the buy-in isn't there to do the changes, to enact it, all of that sort of thing. So Carbon Cleanse has things like group activities, things you can do online. We've had, and lots of it's posted on social media. There's prizes for individual organizations and individual participants. And we get those from sponsors and donors, which is great. And some really fun things that we've seen. We had a group, I think it was from YNCU, do a really fun carpool karaoke, which was so good. We had and another year in Transportation Week, we had one encouraging people to have as low impact commute as possible, and they canoed to work. We've seen sort of between members, sort of like little battles on social media, very friendly battles on social media about, how much energy can they save. And the whole idea is to make it fun, to make it accessible, and to make it so that people feel like they're part of the movement. We really do need to get everybody, as Steve said, everybody in the organization to feel like they are part of the sustainability journey of this organization, and what they do matters. And so it is all intended to drive that culture.
So Tova, when you look at new organizations starting their journey, can you walk me through, like, are there different kind of phases that you think about in terms of where they are in that climate path? Like, how do you think about the evolution going from, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm kind of interested in learning more, all the way through to, kind of where Steve and some of your other members are?
Yeah, there's a sort of typical path and milestones that we support them through. And these can happen over a couple of years. It can be slow. We had one organization do this entire process and set a target in 35 days. That was a bit of a wild ride. Yeah. And some organizations already have a mandate and have it built into their strategic plan, but now they need the technical support to actually do this. So typically we start with a meeting to understand what their business goals are, not their sustainability goals, but what their business goals are. What are you dealing with right now? Where are your pressure points? What are the things that you're trying to accomplish as an organization? And why are you choosing to engage in a program like this? Once we understand that a little more, we help them to do things like create a green team, using the best practices of how do you actually create an effective green team, being, interdepartmental, and making sure there's key people there that you're looking across the business. We'll actually help them run those green teams. We start to collect their data being a really important piece of how do you make good decisions, because we know that organizations measure what matters to them, and then they manage what they measure. And so if they're not measuring, then they're not truly acting with that intentionality. So we get data from them. We look at that data. We look at what their business needs are. We look at what they're hoping to do in sustainability, where they're hoping to get a return on investment. And then we actually will help them create a sustainability plan. And that plan is all working towards setting a target. So we're always hoping for organizations to go through the full process and set a target. And that can be in greenhouse gases and energy. It can also be in waste and or water. It can be any combination thereof. And we're working with them through that process. And providing supports, things like the accounting tool, but also one-on-one coaching, events for learning and professional development. We do member-specific reporting. We help them to do some engagement with senior leadership if that's what they need, help to make some business cases, all of those things to try to be that support. Because what we see is some organizations, as you said, Sanders, will come in and be like, okay, we've been told we have to do this, but we don't really know what we're doing, and we don't know what the steps are, and we don't know what data we need. Can someone help? And so we try to be like, okay, yeah, we got your back, and we got the expertise. We've got great team members who are masters of climate change and that sort of stuff to be able to bring that expertise into the organization.
And so, Steve, like from the member perspective, all these great resources available to you, what were the ones that you kind of leveraged at different parts of your journey and you felt like were the most impactful?
Oh, there were so many. I think it was just joining SWR and leveraging their team, but also the members within SWR as well. How freely people want to give up their journey and tell you that, give you information. It's just been so helpful from the different members of the organization, just to give you a 15-minute chat of where they started and where they're going. And now we're doing the same thing, just giving back to like how like the things that we're doing now. And it was just when we first started like, meeting with Tova's teams, my mind, we were going 8 different directions, and we really focused in with the SWR model about like planning it out. And now we're on a good course, but we were on a bit of a rocket ship there for the first 2 years. We went from rookie of the year, then last year we're partner of the year. And then this year it just felt like, I don't know how we did so much, and we're just trying to maintain what we did this year. And it felt difficult to do that too. But yeah, it was just leaning on the different members and just getting like the free advice you can get from SWR was huge. And just sharing that information about everybody's different, like the different journeys.
Can I just pop in? I want to add to that I think that point of it's not just about SWR's expertise. It's about the whole community. And the topic of this talk is about communities. And it's not just community within your organization, but it's that community of like-minded organizations that are all on this journey. And so there's a few things like we've got a SUSTI Pros, Sustainability Professionals group, and it's free. And anybody whose job is sustainability can come and sit down and go, oh my God, I'm dealing with this. Has anyone dealt with that? Anyone know how to deal with it? Any questions, that kind of thing. And we heard from someone who actually had worked in sustainability well before SWR was founded. And after we were founded, she said, you know, up until then, she felt really lonely, as you talked about, Sanders, really lonely in her job. Now, all of a sudden, she wasn't alone because there's someone in another organization sitting across the table at an event or on an online webinar, which is a really beautiful thing. And I love to hear these stories of inter-member support.
And do you, I know, do you want to talk a little bit about the idea book? Because I think that's quite cool as well.
Yeah, so we've got a whole bunch of online resources, something like 40. Autumn could tell me, but it's something like that. Online resources on our member link portal that every member's got access to. But one of them is called the Idea Book, and it's actually a listing of the things that member organizations have tried. So how, if they, for example, tried to go paperless, how did they do that? What were the stumbling blocks? What were the wins? What were the things that they would do differently? And it works through all of those opportunities. What's the return on investment? And so a new organization that comes in is sometimes like, I have no idea where to even consider doing. And we'll say, go look, flip through the Idea Book. And they go, oh, well, I could give that one a try. And I could give that one a try. And it tells you who it is that tried it. As I said, it'll tell you what they would do differently if they were to do it again, what didn't. And if it didn't work, it's still there and listed so that someone doesn't repeat the same mistakes over and over again. And it does really provide a very easy to access model to come up with some ideas. And oftentimes those easy to implement models are the thing that can get other people in the organization on board. They see success in things already, and then they're like, okay, wait, this actually makes a lot of sense and it works.
And so, Steve, thank you so much for that, Tova. And then I'm just curious. So, Steve, when you start thinking about the momentum that you've created in the organization, I would love to kind of learn about maybe, well, 2 things. One is sustainability initiative that you're most proud of. But I'm also kind of curious to hear about, you know, my understanding is like, you know, as we start to engage more and more of our clients, what we find is that ideas come from most creative places that you'd never expect, right? So I would love to, I guess, maybe start just here about some maybe crazy places or crazy ideas that people came to you with. I'm going to be coming to you, Tova, after this, and maybe the initiative that you're most proud of.
I'll start with the one I'm most proud of. I go back to, it was one of the first initiatives that we did, and that was revamping our garbage and recycling program. It was an employee initiative. Like, they emailed us and said, "Hey, we did this at another organization I worked with," and we said, "That's a great idea." We did it, and I knew we had the buy-in from leadership when I went to them to say, "I want to spend thousands of dollars on garbage and recycling bins," and there was very little hesitation, and they just said, "Great idea, let's do it." And then part of that, then in March of this year, we rolled out a composting program at 7 of our branches. And then between the waste and recycling program, by going to centralized waste, we removed personal waste bins, and by that, I think we calculated about 150 like single-use plastic bins stopped going to landfills per week.
That's
and
incredible.
Then doing our composting program, we rolled out starting in March, and we're composting all of our organics, including paper towel. We've diverted about 525 pounds of waste from landfills just at 7 locations.
Wow.
And then some of the crazy ideas we've had, we just completed a branch in Uptown Waterloo, and we had a recommendation that we should put showers in the branch because so people could bike and use the programs. And I got a yes. And so we have our first branch that has a shower, like a shower in the building, so our staff can actually bike to work or find sustainable transportation to get to work and be able to shower when they get to work and get ready for the day.
Now, are there any crazy ones that weren't approved?
I haven't had too many like that, or like, I don't know how we can do that. We can usually find a way. But that was the one that I didn't think was going to get approved, but it was, yeah, it went to a vote with our leadership team, and it actually was a fairly easy yes. So
as long as they're not asking for towel service,
yeah.
Yeah. But awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Steve. Tova, so give me your, obviously outside of YNCO, we have to put them in their own box, but yeah, tell me about, and you can give multiple examples if you want. I'd love to hear about some of the initiatives that really inspired you.
So there's a couple that really stand out. One is, and some of them are so simple, and some of them are really much more complex. So there's a company in Kitchener called Studio Locale, and they're a family-owned marketing company. And they are a tenant in a building that they don't control. And there's all of these pieces, but they are committed deeply to sustainability and measuring as best as they can and setting targets. And they're working on being a B Corp, and really an incredible organization. And they had decided they wanted to reduce waste, and they were looking at where a lot of their waste in their facility and their office was. And it was a lot of coffee cups, which I'm sure we can all relate to. So they made a point of getting both travel mugs, branded, of course, travel mugs, and ceramic coffee cups for in the office for everybody on the team. And then they set up a jar at the entry. And if you came into the office with a disposable coffee cup, you had to put $1 in the jar. They're like, we did everything we could, and now it's up to you. And then they use that that money to go to employee engagement events and fun events to support their team. So it's fun. It's a little tongue in cheek. You're like, oh, I don't want to have to pay the $1. I'm going to grab my mug. Really cute. So I think that's a really great one. We have a champion of sustainability in this community who is often held up as the poster child for how do you do good sustainable business. And they're called Veriform. Formerly under the leadership of Paul and Rana Rack. And they are a steel fabricator and actually went fully to net zero. They had a 75% organic reduction, and then doubled the offsets of everything that was left for their high heat manufacturing. And at the same time, they doubled the size of their business and saved $1 million doing it. Incredible story. And one of my favorite story of the things he did was he, as a steel fabricator, has loading bay doors. And if anyone's ever worked in a manufacturing or warehousing facility, you know that the heating and cooling just flies out those doors. And Paul was always the big ideas guy, but Rana was the practical, we need to make sure that the doors stay open. And so he was looking for ways to reduce that heating cost by mitigating the issue of the loading bay doors. And so he went to the people who worked at the doors and said, look at how much money this costs. It was costing him $5,000 a month in heating.
Oh my
Look how
God.
much, I know, look how much this is. We could save so much money. They didn't shut the door any sooner. It didn't come down. He was saying, look at our greenhouse gases. We're a sustainable company. It's too high. That didn't work. He offered a bonus, like a percentage of money saved. Didn't work. Someone wanted to sell him the air curtains.
Mm.
But Rana was like, it's too expensive. We can't get the return on investment, small family company. So then Paul is very smart. He went to an electrician and had a limiting switch put on the bay doors. So when the doors are open, the HVAC system turns off and the person working at the door gets cold, and then they shut the door. And the first month that he had that installed, his heating bill went from $5,000 to $500. It was an 8-day payback.
8-day just goes to show, it takes all, you have to really think about the human element, right? Like thinking about the fact that someone's going to be cold and will then therefore shut the door. Like it's often the human element, I think, that gets forgotten when we're thinking about these initiatives. But I think if there's anything that I've learned today, it's two things. One is that it's all about thinking about the human behavior and creating, followership. And the second one is that I need to create a tip jar for when people don't put their ceramic mugs in the dishwasher.
Love it. Love it.
Oh man. Okay. So, when we're thinking about moving forward, and thinking about next steps in terms of sustainability, or thinking really about people who are at the beginning of their journey, what advice would you both give to organizations or companies that are just starting out on their journey? And maybe what we'll do is we'll start with Steve on this one.
One is for the senior leadership team to give them the support that they need to do it. If you can't, like I mentioned it earlier in the call, that if one person can't do it, and if you're always fighting an uphill battle to get sustainability issues done, if you can do more of a push down support to that employee that's trying to do some things, and then also just find that one initiative to drive your employee engagement. Like find one thing, like just start with one thing, like just make that first step. Sometimes that's all it is. And then it's a snowball effect where that one thing leads to another. So.
Yeah, I can't tell you how often we say the same thing to our clients. It's just some people, I think it can be really daunting, right? When you think about climate change, I think you can often hear, at least, from friends and family or other people that, hey, like, what difference am I going to make? I'm such a small speck in this massive problem. And I think that really prevents some people from thinking about the fact that, we can do things, and a lot of small things can add up massively. And they can also just be one small step in the right direction that can lead to much bigger steps later.
Yeah.
Like imagine if your employees hadn't been asking about sustainability, hadn't agitated for it, then, would you have the same focus on sustainability at YNCU? Maybe hard to say, but my guess would probably be not as much, right?
We wouldn't be as far as we are now. Like but it's through our employee engagement is where we are now. And nothing would be done without the support of the YNC organization across the board. So.
Yeah, it's huge. Like that one voice, it gives permission for other people to lend their voice to it as well. That's really great advice. Thanks, Steve. Okay, Tova, same to you.
It's I think that the point about engagement from senior leadership is a really important one. Some of the most successful green teams and just organizations we've seen have sometimes even the CEO sits on the green team, doesn't chair it, but they're there and they're listening so that they've got buy-in. By the time a project comes for approval, if the CEO is like, yeah, this is a good idea, it's probably going to go through. And that could be CFO or someone from that sort of level. But, the thing that often gets those people bought in is tying it to your business needs. So this, we see that there's organizations that come in and say it's the right thing to do. And I actually see that as a bit risky, because then they don't actually see it as a business imperative. And then if a new right thing to do comes up and a new focus, then sustainability falls apart. So tying it to the understanding of, for YNCU, you're trying to, as a cooperative, serve the community for good financial health. And if you think about financial risk, that comes from climate. You think about the risk to your clients and members. You think about all of those things, and you actually tie it back, and you understand that this work is part of how you operate a good business. That's a really critical one. And then I think the other thing is to understand that sometimes change is hard, and you just need to buckle down and let the change happen. So Steve talked about the decentralization of waste, and that is something we definitely see in organizations makes a massive impact. It's so funny how if I can put something under the garbage can on my desk right here, I'm more likely to generate waste than if I have to get up and walk 5 steps over there. I'm less likely to do it. But as soon as you take away those garbage cans, there's going to be somebody who's going to lose it a little bit. Steve's nodding his head.
Yeah.
And so just know, like, there's going to be a transition, and it's okay. They're going to get accustomed to it. And so, like, hold tight. It's the right way to go. You got this.
Yeah, it's so true. I think the thing that really resonated with me is that when we started out our journey with Carbonhound, you know, our whole mission was how do we democratize access to high quality, high integrity climate expertise, right? And, you know, part of that was looking at audiences that were typically underserved, i.e. the small business market, and saying, okay, how can we better build a product for them that's going to be really easy to use, that's going to, you know, make it simple for them to get high integrity reporting. So we interview a bunch of, you know, small businesses. We go through, we build this product that we think is pretty great. We release it, and it was like Field of Dreams, right? Except alternate ending where nobody shows up. And I think the big learning for us off of that was that despite sustainability, you know, having been important to some organizations, you know, often the quantification of that and the credibility of that wasn't as important to those organizations. And so I think we then started to think about where we could find partners and find customers who really cared about the integrity and really wanted to take action. And always, about 90% of our customers, it's always about how does it align to business value creation. And I think we can't just follow our hearts when it comes to climate action. Like, it needs to be an alignment of the heart and the mind, of the business needs and the cultural needs of the organization to truly drive that change, that can be transformational for organizations. At least that's been our experience as well. So before we jump into questions, I want to ask one last one, which was, when thinking about the future of sustainability, maybe the future of the SWR program, or for Steve, the future of YNCU, you know, are there any initiatives, or what are you most excited about to work on next? And we can start with Steve again.
We got a couple things coming. We've just actually received word that we have 2 of our sites selected for the Charge On grant program. So we'll be rolling out more EV charging stations.
Awesome.
We're continuing on with our partners on how we can transition some of our buildings to net zero, and then what that transition plan looks like, and get certifications that way. And then also, as things come down the pipe further, is getting into what's the bigger topic, which is financed emissions, which we never really talked about today. What that is a whole nother onion of layers to peel back, but that's a
Yep.
future project that we really want to get our teeth sunk into and grow with YNCU. So
awesome. All right, Tova, what are you most excited about?
Oh, well, there's the intersectionality of a lot of the work that we do. And so there's the Impact Network program, which we've been talking about today, and that's what we support YNCU with. But they won the Partner of the Year last year because of things like our microforest program. They also participate in that, and conversations we've been having about the community climate impacts and all of that kind of stuff. So that intersectionality of work is really important, including things like our mobility infrastructure, zero emission vehicle adoption work. That's been something we were looking at. And we are also in the process of looking for ways that we can scale up additional supports for organizations. Steve talked about financed emissions, and that makes me go, there's all kinds of ways we can look at that. And how do we actually get everybody for an organization like YNCU on the same platform to be able to actually quantify meaningfully with real credibility into what is the impact of something like a financed emission or of a value chain as a whole. Mm-hmm. So we're sort of investigating how can we do that in a meaningful way that is supportive of real business transformation across an entire value chain and life cycle.
Yeah, the impact that companies can have through their value chain, I think is, I mean, I don't think it's understated, but I think it's often not thought about. Like everyone thinks about the physical operations, but what you're purchasing, who you're purchasing from, how you're purchasing, the types of agreements you have in place. I think on average, it's about 89% of your footprint, right? If you look across all industries, and in financial services, it's what, closer to 100. So, but so we'll get to some questions. But it does seem like you've got one unaccounted tree from your program on Steve's desk that he seems to have taken with him. So.
Should have planted that one, Steve.
Yeah, that was the last planting was quite the planting. That was some hard soil we had, but it was still enjoyable doing it with the students at that school. But yeah, we needed pickaxe for that one.
Oh man. One of my colleagues actually, she has a tree planter, so they do have specialized tools that seem to make it a little bit easier. Maybe next time. Okay, cool. So we've got a couple of questions that we've got from the crowd. So we had one person who asked us, "Hey Steve, who is on the green team?" So that's actually a really interesting question. So love to hear who's on your green team, Steve, and then Tova, maybe we can throw it over to you to talk a little bit about what the typical makeup is that you see across all your members.
Yeah, so ours is a cross-functional team. So we have members from different parts of the organization. We have someone from our payment services. We have MSRs that sit on it. We have a person from IT. We have people from commercial lending. We have our CLT sponsors, our community impact officer, myself. It's across the organization. It's not just we originally probably started with a smaller group, but it's really blossomed, and we're getting more and more, and we're really trying to get further in the organization and get different departments engaged and things like that. So we can just heavily focus on driving that sustainable culture and really driving sustainability across YNCU, not just because we obviously when most people started, it was just heavily corporate driven, but then as the green team's grown, it's across the whole entire organization.
Have you noticed that there's certain, was there inflection points on that green team when all of a sudden you felt like there's a clear shift in momentum? And I'm just curious as to what the tipping point was.
I'm going to say it was probably after our first carbon cleanse when we were really trying to drive it. And it was just seeing the engagement starting then. You can start seeing the wheels turning with different employees. Then you can start seeing the passions for different people come out. And then we could find people out to volunteer for different things. Then we started doing tree plantings and we started doing city cleanups. And it became that each branch is now doing their own. It's just, we don't have to plan one big one where we're letting the branches start and organize their own by sending them their own garbage bags and gloves and things like that. So
very cool. So kind of decentralizing it a little bit more. Yeah. Okay, Topa, how about you? Who do you see typically leading the charge in terms of these green teams, and what does their typical makeup look like? And I'm guessing that not all companies are as successful as others. So what are the ingredients of a successful green team from your perspective?
Yeah, you're right. Not all of them are as successful as others. And we do find that the organizations with a good green team are usually the most successful in their reductions and meeting targets overall. So it is a critical piece. And actually, in a lot of organizations, they use the green team as a leadership incubator for people. So it's a great place to take someone who you think is an up and coming leader and give them some responsibility, potentially to chair the committee, et cetera, and to foster that leadership within the community. So very interesting way to use it. Always, we have a champion like Steve, and it could be a facilities person. Some organizations have sustainability designated staff. Some organizations, if HR is their primary driver, that's going to be the champion. But we do actually recommend that there be representation from not only the business units, but also from your operational functional areas. So there should be someone from finance on the green team. There should be someone from communications, because that can be internal and external and such a critical part of that culture drive. Human resources. A lot of times you're going to see that that's in sort of employee engagement, but also recruiting and making sure you're getting people that are values aligned. You want to make sure that you're bringing in all kinds of people from those operational groups and then your business areas as well. And I'm going to tell a little story. I won't say who it is because it's not a win story. There was a member organization we were working with, and they really wanted to do something as both an employee perk and to reduce the number of plastic water bottles in their operations, and they had staff that were out in the field on a regular basis. So they went and bought these giant, those big Bubba mugs that were insulated. This is way before Stanley was a thing. And those great big ones that are like this big, like this, and they bought them and they had them logos put on them, that sort of thing. And they gave them out to everybody who was working in the field. And they bought the big ones thinking they were insulated, that you could put lots of water in there and you wouldn't have to get water bottles throughout the day. Great. Nobody was using them. And it was the green team that cooked up this idea. And when they went to the people who were working in the field, they said, why aren't you using them? And they said, they're too big for the cup holders in our vehicles and they roll around in the vehicle. It's just a great illustration as to why you need to have someone from your different business areas in the green team so that you're making decisions based on the realities of how people operate.
It maybe leads to a great question, which is, how do you decide what to tackle first?
If I can start with that, I think Steve really was very correct in saying the very first thing should be the easy win. I like to think of it as the gateway into sustainability, that if you pick something that's really difficult, like insulating the entire outside of your building, it's too daunting. And people then say, oh, it's a problem and we can't do this. But if you pick something that has real impact, but also is a low hanging fruit, a more possible thing to do, you then start to see the beauty of the possible. And I would encourage people to try to move away from the idea of we need the perfect solution. In the environmental movement, they seem to have this mindset. A lot of people do that. Well, if it's not perfect, then we shouldn't do it. But there are no perfect solutions. Progress is much better, and perfection is the enemy of progress. So take a step, make something happen. It can change the whole culture and open doors for other things.
100%. And just to switch gears a little bit, so we had a question around and maybe, I'm not sure how much insight you might have into it, but this is really for Steve. So how would you compare the value of local, regional, in-person communities like SWR versus online communities like B Corp or LinkedIn groups and that sort of thing? And let's start with you, just get a feeling of, as you're evaluating and looking at all these different tools, how have you compared and contrasted those groups?
I have to say I use them all. Usually, I'm going to say because of the relationship, my first go-to would be SWR, just because of the partnership we do have with them. We are a B Corp certified company, so I like to get on the B Corp chats as well to see what other people are doing. But sometimes it's depending on where it's happening in the world. There's just certain things that just don't, like, you're not able to do in Canada, but you get into your B Corp Ontario locals and things like that. There's lots of things that, again, it's sharing knowledge and sharing information that you just might not be thinking about. And then it's just different avenues to get that information. Where I find SWR is great because we have a lot more regional in-person get-togethers to share information. Where you go on the larger scale B Corp, it's a lot more online chats and things like that because there's not as many events that B Corp is hosting. But I think it's just depending on the problem you're trying to solve would be the solution you're looking for. But I do try to take advantage of them all because, then you're also just broadening your network, broadening the scope of information you're taking in and things like that. So.
Very cool. And Tova, what do you see in terms of how members are leveraging different types of resources and communities like that?
Yeah, I actually think that it's just like Steve said, it's a yes and answer, always more. And we are all rowing in the same direction. We are all striving for the same thing, to make business better and to make it so that it's less impactful and our economy can be stronger and each individual organization can be stronger. And so we really do strive to have a yes and actually SWR has a partnership with B Corp as well. So we have a whole access to their B Corp certification especially for organizations who maybe don't have operational control over their space, or they're a smaller organization, startups, that sort of thing, so that they're actually building their business in a way that aligns with sustainability goals, but maybe they are not in a position to be doing deep measurement, or their materiality is very low. And so certainly there is a yes and no one, it's just like any relationship in your life. No one person can be all things to you, and that it takes a community to move forward. So both the community of other organizations out there doing really wonderful work, as well as within each network, whether it's the B Corp network or the SWR network, et cetera.
Variety is the spice of life, as they say, especially when it comes to sustainability. So we did have a question about organizations that might be outside of the Waterloo catchment area. Are there any organizations that you think that you'd suggest that folks look at?
Yeah, thanks for that question. We serve Waterloo Region, certainly where we were founded, also Guelph, Wellington, Perth, and Oxford. So assuming we are talking outside of that catchment area, we actually, SWR, founded another nonprofit called Green Economy Canada. And it came out of our organization about 10 years ago when I came in. And it was because we had so many requests from other nonprofits across Canada to create something like what SWR offers. So Green Economy Canada has been doing the good work to take the framework of the SWR model and help other nonprofits create this. And so there are locations in Hamilton, Burlington, there's one in London, Sudbury, across. And so if you go to the Green Economy Canada website, there are opportunities there if you're outside of our catchment to be able to get similar support. They won't be the same. It is not a franchise model where everything's the same. It's inspired by the same model, but tailored to what that local community needs. So I'd encourage you to go look at them.
Yeah, and
But I would
Sorry, I was say just to jump on that, we have reached out to the other partners from Green Economy Canada because it's been helpful for us because we're in such a vast communities. We're not just in Kitchener-Waterloo region. Like we've talked with Rethink Green, it's the hub in Sudbury about like what's the pressing issues for Northern Ontario and how do we help and how do we participate. It's just again expanding your network and also finding what's going on locally, and they've been helpful for that too.
And actually, it's interesting with that network. Sorry, one more thing with that network, with the idea that since YNCU is headquartered in Waterloo Region or in SWR's catchment generally, we help them with the carbon accounting and all of that sort of thing. But that doesn't preclude intersectional conversations with the other organizations across the Green Economy Canada network.
Amazing. Well, I think that's a pretty inspiring note to leave on. So, help is out there and they're waiting for your phone call. So please do engage with SWR, with Green Economy Canada. They're great organizations. We partner with both of them. So we really appreciate the impact that they're having in terms of helping move Canadian businesses towards a more sustainable future. So thank you so much for coming, Tova. Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate you taking them a moment just to really, share an example with the rest of the world that we really can take steps forward and make an impact. So thank you.
Well, thank you for hosting and for creating this platform. And it's been a great conversation and for the amazing partnership. It's great to work with Carbonhound and YNCU.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. It's been a great conversation.